And now we are moving on to our second speaker, to the art historian Dr. Renate Bionkowska. She has worked intensively on the art and culture of Polish Jewry. She has authored many books, articles, and organized exhibitions on this topic. Amongst others, she's published a monograph on Roman Gramsztyk in Polish between Ziemiańska Cafe and Montparnasse, which was published in 2004 in Warsaw. From her many exhibitions, I just want to name the work and life of Maurycy Trąbacz, Artur Markowicz and friends, Simon Montzan, Jan Hrunkowski, Władysław Swadowski. Since 1999, she works at the Museum of the History of Polish Jews, where she serves now as chief curator of the collection. Please.
Thank you, Olaf, for the kind presentation. 2 years ago, Jakub Weinle's painting, Escape, Pogrom, found its way into the Polin Museum collection. As it turned out, it was one of the versions of the composition of the same title, still considered lost. Painted around 1907-1910, the big painting is one of the important artistic statements on the tragedy of the pogroms in the Russian Empire and Kingdom of Poland, and a significant personal declaration by the author. Before I move to the painting, I would like to remind you of Jakub Weinles, a painter who is forgotten today, whose academic, genre, and religious painting on Jewish themes were very popular in the early 20th century. Weinles was born in 1960 in Konstantinov, Ukraine. 10 years later, his family moved to Warsaw, where Jakub began his education in a secondary school run by Samuel Dickstein, a prominent representative of the Poles of Mosaic faith community. Between 1888 and 1992, he was a student of Wojciech Gerson at the drawing school or drawing class in Warsaw. He continued his studies at the Academy of Fine Art in Munich. In 1998, the artist returned to Warsaw, and from then on, he was an active participant in the city artistic life, including solo shows at Alexander Krywult Salon in 1905 and Stefan Kulikowski Art Salon 1907, and of course in different exhibitions at Zachęta Gallery. The home of the painter, as his wife, Łucja Kaufman, a pianist and music teacher, was a quote, meeting place for artists. Their daughters, Maria Weinles-Heikin and Franciszka Temerson, inherited their parents' talents. Both they played the piano and were involved in the art. One of the first artistic projects by Weinles was the publication of the Polish Hebrew primer, Aleph-Bet, for Israeli children. It was published in 1902. This textbook for religion education, rather than a primer, begin with the presentation of the Polish alphabet, and in fact is written entirely in Polish. Weinles' illustrations, which are not always directly related to the text, are, a different kind of illustration he did. It is a strange and very interesting primer. And definitely the text is a little bit strange, but undoubtedly the main purpose of this book was not to teach Hebrew, but to introduce children, often raised only in the Polish language, to the world of Judaism and biblical tradition. I quote, all figurative composition from Jewish life are an expression of warm and painful empathy, end of quote, wrote Franciszka Temerson about his father's works. An excellent confirmation of this word we can find in this Yom Kippur big painting. It was made at the beginning of the 20th century, and in the 30s was purchased to decorate the Great Hall of the Jewish Community Building in Warsaw. Now is in National Museum in Warsaw. When Weiles began his artistic career, integration seems to be the most obvious choice for artists. At the end of the 19th century, however, it turned out that assimilation was not widely accepted by either the Polish or Jewish communities, and in fact only affected a small part of the Jewish community, mainly the elite. This did not stop individual process of assimilation and acculturation, but for those who were not satisfied with a traditional life that limited their aspiration, but who did not want to follow the path of integrationalism, were left to seek a new path of national development and build their Jewish, mainly secular identity based on language, Yiddish on Hebrew, history, culture, and national ties, rather than solely religious one. And it was one of the way Weiles follow. At the beginning of the 20th century, this formation of modern Jewish identity was also influenced by pogroms. And it's widely, this pogroms were widely showed this by, of course, Jewish poet, but also Jewish painter. And in the works of many artists, Plichowski, Hirschenberg, Minkowski, Markowicz, and others, we can find the representation of the pogroms. By taking up this painful subject, the artist protested, and at the same time suffered along the nation. Despite assimilation and blending into Polish life, the bonds of national community were revived, and artists wanted to redefine their place in the world around them. Weiles' painting depicting pogroms should be viewed in this context. In self-portrait, he portrayed himself as a painter with a palette and brush in his hand. But it was not coincidence that he used his own painting, Escape, as the background for his image. The painter directly showed the element of his own identity that was most important to him, art and Jewish faith. The tragedy of pogroms, desperate escape, fear and loneliness of those murdered and expelled, found his empathic artistic expression in Escape. Among the crowd of terrified men, women, men, and children, the figure of an old man holding the Torah scroll catches the eye. The man and boy lying next to him on the cobblestones died protecting the Torah scrolls brought out of the burning synagogue. In Weile's painting, apart from the victim, the most important element is the Torah. And the artist returned to this motif. A variation was, for example, a painting now only from a reproduction in the press as the Safe Torah. And this one, as I said, this is not exactly the same as the big original painting. Weiles, like other artists, focused his attention to the victims, ignoring the perpetrators. The individual fate of Jewish men and women depicted on canvas became the fate of the whole community. Seen from today's perspective, this and other visual representation of pogroms had a huge impact on the common image of the Jewish past in this part of Europe. Presented in the palaces of art, they reached minorities, but their mass dissemination in the postcard, excuse me, gave them gave them significance and made them a symbolic image of the Jewish faith. Weile's painting was also reproduced on a postcard, which allowed the message to reach the Jewish street and become part of Jewish collective memory. Escape was not shown by Weiles at the Zachęta Gallery, where Hirschenberg and Minkowski shown that they work. But it was shown on a joint exhibition organized in April 1911 with Maurycy Trębacz and Józef Gabowicz. It took place outside the official art salon in Warsaw, in a venue provided by Magnus Kryński Jewish School. The exhibition was welcomed with a joy and hope, but more by a critic from Yiddish Daily Hind. I quote, "What we know about the Jewish painting is that there were Jewish artists, Jewish paintings, albeit small and not very rich. But if we wanted to familiarize ourselves with it, we have no opportunity to do so." And added, "They were almost the first, Trębacz, Weiles, and Gabowicz, who had the courage to create something similar, like a Berlin exhibition, in our country, although the exhibition of their paintings was not officially under the Jewish banner. It was with Jewish content and for Jews, and that is why they deserve our sincere thanks." You see, this is the photographs from Gabowicz album. So Gabowicz is on the first, but in the background you see the painting by Weiles, Yom Kippur, and Escape. The artist's intention was to organize a popular exhibition, the aim of which was to promote beauty, I quote, "beauty and art among the broad masses of the less cultured audience." However, organizing a separate exhibition of Jewish artists outside general Polish art institution close to the Jewish district. In fact, on the border between Polish and Jewish Warsaw, was on the one hand a challenge to the ideology of assimilation, and on the other hand, it showed how anti-Semitism, which since the late 19th century had become a significant and widespread component of the ideology of the Polish nationalists, had influenced the growth and of nationalist sentiment among Jewish artists as well. The assimilationist from Nowa Gazeta asked about this exhibition. Is such separatism in art necessary and useful? We doubt it. Whatever else, art should not know religion. And at the same time, the Index national journalist believed that, I quote, Jews can and do adopt pan-European elements, and they also draw on Polish culture, but they cannot be creator of Polish national culture. It resulted in demands to exclude Jewish artists from Polish artistic group, and Stanisław Pienkowski proposed that Jewish artists should form a separate society and stop wandering around in foreign corners when they feel uncomfortably and uneasy. I also proposed that Polish artists' societies should not accept Jews as members, just as they do not accept Russian, Germans, and French. Rising anti-Semitism pushed aside memoirs of Polish Jewish Brotherhood of January uprising. It turned out that for many Poles, Jews were no longer brothers in the struggle for independence, but rivals in the capital's economy, intruders on Polish soil. In discussion and polemics in the press, they were increasingly referred to as foreign element, I quote, hostile and capable of becoming Poles. It's a plea that Jews were seen by some members of the Polish society not as a reinforcement of Polishness, but as a threat to it. For Jewish artists and intellectuals in Warsaw, the collapse of the idea of assimilation in the Kingdom of Poland proved to be equally important. Violence did not return to the general artistic life of the capital, participating exclusively in Jewish artistic life. And although another Jewish artist did not give up participation in the general Polish artistic life of Warsaw and Poland, the exhibition of 1911 and later those of 1913 and 14 organized by Abraham Eisenberg consolidate a group of Jewish artists and paved the way for further joint appearances. As it turned out, they were the beginning of the formation of Jewish artistic life in Warsaw. And this is, you see, this first exhibition again in 1927 in Warsaw, but this time it was a charity exhibition made by this together by these three artists. Violence, very important after the war factor was the appearance of the Jewish Society for the Encouragement of Fine Art. Weinles had three solo exhibitions there in 1922, 1930, and the last one in 1938. And this last one was a posthumous exhibition because Weinles died in Warsaw on July 7, 1938. His death was an occasion to recall the beginning of Jewish artist activity in Warsaw. In Weinles' case, it was his education in the drawing school, followed by studies at the Munich Academy, and where he met the group of Jewish artists from Poland, Henryk Glittenstein, Bernard Trembach, Nathan Altman, and Weinles, who is the author of this drawing. And later, his involvement in laying the foundation of Jewish artistic life in reborn Poland. I quote, "In the changed post-war conditions, Weinles felt the need for a Jewish artistic organization. And when Jewish Society for the Encouragement of Fine Art was established, he was among the dedicated collaborators of this institution for nearly 20 years. In the field of his social activity, the artist gained great recognition for his selflessness and nobility of character." It was a quotation from Michał Weizsäcker. Oh, and this is photographs with Berlevi and other people were engaged in the creation of the Jewish Society. On September 25, a posthumous exhibition of the painter works was opened at the Jewish Society. And it was, in fact, not only posthumous exhibition, but also a retrospective one, and a lot of painting with gutter at Graniczna Street. The artist's only granddaughter, Jasia Hajkin, Jasia Reichardt, who was 5 years old at the time, wrote, "It was my first visit to an art exhibition. The exhibition was just too sad. The people around me wore too much black. I prefer to think of my grandfather's studio with his few family portraits in light colors." The Polish press did not report the death of the artist. In the face of unbridled anti-Semitism, which also made itself felt in the artistic life, there was a lack of willingness, a decency to remember Weinles, a figure deeply rooted in Warsaw. The Jewish press wrote, I quote, "He was a Jew in the full sense of the word, in art and in everyday life," end of quote. The topic of assimilation, crucial for the first generation of Jewish artists, both in shaping their own work and in the support they received from integrationist circles, was not raised. However, it was recalled in the press that in 1905, Weinles was a guest at the 7th Zionist Congress in Basel, from which he kept a yellow admission card and a dozen or so drawings shown at this exhibition in 1938. However, it is difficult to find traces of his involvement in Zionism in the painter works. Of course, it was different in life, but his connection with the diaspora remained a constant in his art, both in his choice of subject and motives. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your insights. And perhaps if you could stop sharing the presentation, we could see
Okay,
glasses
yeah.
again.
Mhm. Oh, it's
So
okay. Yeah.
the floor is open for questions, comments, ideas. Elena,
I also have a question.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. My question is about the Jewish Society for the Advancement of Fine Arts. I'm sorry, I forget the actual name. Can you speak more about them specifically? Were they connected to the Polish version? There's like the TPSS, the Polish Society for the Advancement of Arts. I think it was based in Krakow, but they also published did exhibitions in Warsaw. Were they excluded from that organization? Did they have any connection to the arts and crafts movement in general, the Young Poland movement? Thanks.
No, Jewish Society for, was created after the war in the independent Poland. So any connection to Young Poland and art and craft. And it was society based in Warsaw, but also organized also exhibition in Krakow and other cities. And it was not exclusively Jewish because in the statute you can that everybody can take a part in the exhibition, but in reality only Jewish artists and took part in different exhibition. It was well known in Warsaw, organized almost 100 exhibition till 1939. And of course, this is a close link to especially to the Zachęta Gallery in Zachęta Society in Warsaw, mm, mm, which was created in the half of the 19th century as a representation of Polish cultural life. Not official one, not Russian, but Polish one. And this societies you mentioned in Krakow and Lvov, it was almost the same. You know, they work on the same basis. So it was kind of a very, very close link between this in terms of ideas between this organization.
Thank you.
I have a question, Renata. This painting that you showed from his posthumous catalog, where you see like ceremonial objects, Jewish ceremonial objects. Do you know anything about it? Because I'll tell you what I know and then tell me what do you know. I found it in an article in Nash Preglet, I think, next to the text about Benjamin Mintz's collection.
Mhm.
So is this a painting of his collection? Or did Benjamin Mintz own this painting by Weinless?
You know, this, I'm not sure, but it's probably, I have to check it. This is also, it also could be a part of the collection, so-called collection by Jewish community in Warsaw. Because it was published also in this newspaper they published in the late 30s. I check it because I'm not sure, but this is very interesting painting. I have to say that we don't know a lot of works by Weinless. Only a few are in the Polish collection and Israeli collection. So, in fact, we cannot say more about him as an artist. So, this is it's always problem. We know his work mainly from press and catalog of the exhibition. And I've forgotten to say that the painting itself is a gift from Jasia Reichart to Polin Museum.
Oh, so it exists.
No, this is not the original one, and this is not from family collection. She bought it in the 70s in United States. And the original one was much, much bigger.
But this is copy of the original, you think?
This is copy or author version of it. A little bit the differences you can see.
I see.
No,
You don't know if there is any connection with Mint's collection, if this is the painting of Mint's collection.
With this ceremonial object.
Yeah. Oh, you were talking, I see.
I'm talking about the Skype, yeah,
I
problem.
see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Renata.
Any more questions from the audience? Well, if not, thank you again. We are quite late, so I'm suggest we are moving on, and I welcome our third speaker, Professor Markus Silbe, who is an associate professor in the Department of Jewish History at the University of Haifa and director of the Interdisciplinary Unit for Polish Studies and chairman of the School of Arts, Culture, and Hermeneutics at the Faculty of Humanities. His research focuses on the relationship between citizenship and ethnicity and the intersection of state policies and individual experiences, with particular emphasis on Poland. He has published widely. I just want to name a selection with Szymon Rudnicki. He authored Polish-Israeli Diplomatic Relations, a selection of documents in a Polish and a Hebrew version. In 2025, he published Jewish National Councils in Eastern Europe in 1917 to 1919, and currently he is preparing a book on Polish Jewish and Polish Jewish popular culture in interwar Poland. Please.
Thank you, Olaf. I will open my presentation, and it will be prepared in a while. So here, share screen. So thank you again, Olaf, for introducing me, and thank you, Miriam, for having me here. I hope that now some lighter and ephemeral material will ease our discussion about Jewish responses to anti-Semitism. So let's jump into the material. A Jew and a Nazi with a dog are traveling in a train between Sopot and Danzig. The Nazi began cursing the Jew. When the Jew tried to calm him, the Nazi shouted, "Be silent, you dog! A dog you are! Every Jew is a dog! How do you like this dog? This is your brother!" "That's not true," says the Jew. "He's your brother." "He's your brother! He's your brother!" "You know what? If he's circumcised, he's my brother. But if not, he's your brother." This joke, published in 1933 in the Polish humorous Warsaw's weekly Śmiech do rana, Laughing Until the Morning, is almost identical to a joke in a monologue written by the Yiddish poet and playwright Moshe Broderson while changing the setting. It was not a train into the limbo region between Germany and Poland, the free city of Danzig, but the entrance of the mikveh, the place where the Jewish body is naked. Gigan and Schumacher, the most famous Yiddish comic duo in interwar Poland, first performed it on stage at the Yiddish Review Theater Ararat. Later, in 1935, the monologue was recorded on vinyl by the Sirena record label and sold by the thousands. In both versions, the Jew had the upper hand and the anti-Semites' words backfired. As other creators of mass culture industry in interwar Poland, they produce and sold the same product in different incarnations, in the press, in a radio theater, on a record, or through films or the radio. Mass culture in interwar Poland functioned as an integrated system of popular theater, music, radio, and cinema, with the seamless transfer of personnel and products across its media and languages. Creators involved in mass culture in interwar Poland challenged the country's ethnification and nationalizing policies and the hegemonic cultural ethno-national discourse that the state promoted, presenting alternatives through songs, sketches, and jokes. They produced images, ideas, and discourses that addressed the meanings of the categories they raised within the context in which they lived and acted. Since the Polish interwar state left popular culture to free markets, creators made their work tradable, thereby commodifying the cultural product. In the new interwar Polish mass culture, humor was a tool to confront anti-Semitism in the creative struggles for their place in the Polish society. To analyze this phenomenon, this paper will address 4 questions. First, how did mass culture perform anti-Semitism? How did the commodification of culture shape the rebellious potential of these acts? How did different media's vehicle, press, stage, vinyl, condition the same content and its reception? And how did the state react to these creative reactions across media and languages? When dealing with anti-Semitism, this new mass culture ridiculed both the fallacies of nationalist anti-Semitic discourse and the politics of discrimination that most Polish Jews faced in the Second Polish Republic. A case in point was the monologue from the very early days after the Polish independence performed at Qui Pro Quo, the most iconic Polish literary cabaret, by Józef Pikuś Ullstein, a very popular Jewish actor on the Polish scene, and this monologue is about Polonizing Jewish names. I quote, "When Poland will finally exist, the threat of stereotypes will be cut, and the Pole will be a citizen. Probably the moment is already quite near when foreigners will Polonize their family names, and yes, there is no shortage of such cases. Soon the Yiddish surnames will be changed. Hintenschwanz, Stilwogonski, Kalsoner, Margatkiewicz, and Szmuglower, Szmugliewicz, Schwarzensow, Czarnokanapski, Maciej-Wajw, Macanobawski, each Kon will be Konicki, each Brown, simply Count Branicki. I want to convince you that such a miracle will be really happen. It will be a paradise, and it will convenient for the language too, when the whole country will move to change their names according to the new fashion. When the neologisms spring forth, then there will be no more anti-Semitism." In this monologue, Józef Pikuś Ullstein laughed on the one hand at the belief in assimilation and Polonization as a solution to anti-Semitism, pointing even to the fallacy of making Jewish invisible. On the other hand, he mocked the anti-Semitic fantasy of Polska bez Żydów, Poland without Jews, a motive we will return to later. In fact, through monologues, sketches, and even songs of this kind, we noted the large gap between the speaker's aspiration and its intuitive understanding of reality. One scene of 1923 show of the legendary Polish literary cabaret Qui Pro Quo I mentioned earlier shows children playing in a Warsaw courtyard. The children's names Lunia, Duba, Tukcia, Kniecio, Pempesz, Sioniek, and Obywatel symbolized Poland's political parties. One dialogue between 2 of these children mock anti-Semitism. They told me that it is all because of the Jews. Because of the Jews and the cyclists. Why because of the cyclists? Why because of the Jews? The senselessness of anti-Semitism, of the anti-Semitic discourse, is emphasized in this childish dialogue. Tuwim's monologue, Pies mojej żony, My Wife's Dog, from 1930, is another example of mocking this absurdity. lampooning the Jewish difficulties of owning a dog. The character in the monologue mocks the very phenomenon of racist anti-Semitism. The character talking is a Varsovian Jew. Now there is a new worry. Tutush, the dog, wants to be a daddy. Day and night we are looking to find a bitch for him. I give you my word that I haven't been chasing any girl like that. Inappropriate marriage, God forbid, is not an option for Tutush. We have to find ausgerechnet a canine count or a marquise for him. I never let him out on the street alone. I bring him home 5 to 10 concubines a day. No luck. This whole thing is not for Tutush. Finally, a few days ago, I learned that the Count Pikaiwo has a bitch with the same pedigree, the same blue canine blood. Well, I made an appointment with him and all the arrangements were already made, but this morning he called me to say, I am very sorry, but this heavenly canine wedding is impossible. Why? Because we found out that you are Jews. The comic relief about pure canine blood and the dog's impotence exposed the absurdity of ethno-national purity and anti-Semitism. The foxtrots at Zosa Nos and What a Nose, staged in 1932, again in this literary cabaret, reverses the discourse of impotence. Please pay attention to the musical phrase that begins the song. It is this musical phrase is the motive considered the quintessence of Jewish music, and it marks the song as Jewish. The song transformed the negative stereotypical big Jewish nose into a viral attribute with sex appeal, staging in this way anti-Semitism. It is not talking about a regular big nose, but a Jewish one. A potent Jewish one. But there were, of course, limitations to this staging this anti-Semitism. The first was public taste. For instance, the vaudeville Carrera Alpha Omega, staged at the beginning of September 1936 amid increasing anti-Semitism, shows the limitations of combating anti-Semitism through commodified tools. The show was a real hit in Warsaw, and the producers decided to tour the country with it. However, in a few cities, it was not possible to present it. In Lviv, due to growing anti-Jewish sentiments, none of the local theater's managers agreed to rent an auditorium. In Sosnowiec, they succeeded in renting the municipal theater, but the anti-Semitic audiences erupted into a demonstration during the performance. Suddenly, the lights dimmed, and a barrage of rotten eggs rained down from the gallery. The tango Rebecca is perhaps, let's see, 1 minute. It's too loud. Well, the tango Rebecca is perhaps the finest example of the limitations of commodification of culture in staging anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic position. This song was first performed at the Morskie Oko Revue Theater in October 1932 by Dora Kalinovna, a popular actress openly identified as Jewish. Rebecca Next. Rebecca is set in the marketplace of Kazimierz Dolny, Kazimierz nad Wisłą, a Polish shtetl that symbolized Polish-Jewish coexistence. It is an iconic place in the imaginary of interwar Polish-Jewish culture. It tells about the legend of King Casimir the Great, who married as Esterka, a Jewish girl. It is a shtetl that symbolizes the symbiosis of these two inseparable cultures. Echoing the tale of Esther, the lyric tells of Rebecca, a lonely Jewish shopkeeper girl who falls passionately in love with a chivalrous non-Jew at first sight. In contrast to the myth, the contemporaneous Poles Paul does not accept her. Rebecca became an overnight sensation. On stage, the song told about the rejection of the Jews as an integral part of Poland, becoming an anti-Semitism reaction. During my performance there in Zakopane, a famous winter resort, some anti-Semitics shouted, "Death to the Jewish tango! We do not want any more Rebecca!" Off stage, on vinyl records, without the Kazimierz context, the same song with the same lyrics and music lost much of its anti-Semitic political meaning. The song was so popular among Jews that Jewish street singers set it to new Yiddish lyrics. Interestingly enough, one of these adaptations described the Jewish unrequited love for Germany, bringing back the anti-Semitic connotations. Madagascar 1937 was a satirical song mocking the Polish colonial and anti-Semitic fantasies about conquering Madagascar and resettling Polish Jews there. The song was first performed at the Yiddish Klinkus Theater Ararat. The song was a hit. Oh, Madagascar, a black land suffocating half-wild Africa. Oh, Madagascar, coconuts and bamboo trees. There will be tribes. Maybe it will be better for me. Oh, Madagascar, beloved country. Long life the black land. First of all, I have to bring order there. I have to put what it is not there. I will build a mikveh. A bathhouse must be. Also a restaurant I will open, and then my brother-in-law will come for a kois and for ram. The song was later translated into Polish, recorded, and then sold by the thousands. However, when the song was detached from the Yiddish and the Yiddish stage, the anti-Semitic fantasies lost their character as a grotesque and a protest song. The priest Stanisław Cieciak, a leading theoretician of anti-Semitism action in Poland in the late 30s, self-presented as a Talmud expert who attempted to portray Jews as frauds and traitors, has been mocked on stage. A Yiddish monologue mocking his ostensibly expertise achieved tremendous success. On stage, Gigan presented the priest, having him recite verses and interpret them in a way that mocked the Jewish community. On the stage, Cieciak, proud of his distorted understanding of the Torah, confidently going out of the stage, stood up, tapped his forehead with his finger and said, one must have a Jewish head. How is it called in the Talmud? Tuches. A tuches you have to have. Anti-Semitic performance were not only a political move, it brought new Jewish public to the Polish literary cabaret. The Oszelczyzewska Hearts or Tales program played at the Polish Review Theater Alibaba in June 1939 included a song mocking Hitler. I quote the performer. To what extent was the figure of Hitler a sensation can be seen from the fact that Jews in kaftans partially filled the hall. People who did not understand much Polish and for whom the figure of Hitler was a magnet. When I was standing on the stage as the Führer's Waxwork, I saw the excitement in this part of the audience and heard the murmur, Hitler, Hitler. Then tickets sold swam. Then tickets sold swam in earnings in front of the ticket office, end quote. After a month of playing the review, however, the German ambassador lodged a formal protest to the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs against ridiculing the figure of Hitler. After a special German-Polish commission watched the review, the censor banned the presentation of Hitler's figure in the spectacle. So, when the capitalistic law of supply and demand failed to restrain political critique, the state stepped in. When contents crossed unwritten borders, censor intervened. The state then domesticated two transgressive contents. Another good example of censor when the law of supply and demand failed to restrain political critique is the 1938 skit Der letzte Eid in Poland. the Letzter in Poland, the last Jew in Poland. Żygan and Schumacher performed a sketch in the Yiddish Kleinkunsttheater, referred to the motif of Poland without Jews, mentioned earlier, then was overpresent thanks to Tadeusz Holenderski's satirical novel Polska bez Żydów, Poland without Jews, published in a serial form in the Polish language Jewish daily Nasz Przegląd, mentioned earlier, a few months before the premiere of Żygan and Schumacher's show. The skit portrayed an apocalyptic scene of Warsaw in 1939 after the forced expulsion of Jews, rendering Poland Judenrein. Struggling to function without Jews, trade collapsed, the economy stagnated, and cultural life came to standstill. In a twist, the Poles desperately sought to keep the last remaining Jew, realizing their dependence on them. A government delegation implored him to stay. Eventually, the government bestows the order of Polonia Restituta upon his Jew. As he puts the medal in his lower back and turns around, the audience sees that he was already wearing the Krzyż Zasługi, the Polish Cross of Merit, which he received from the Polish government in recognition of his service to the state. The spotlight then highlights Bo's medal on the last Jew very lower back. Its caustic critique led to censorship. Żygan and Schumacher were forced to remove it from the show after 5 performances to avoid arrest. The Yiddish Kleinkunst, as the Polish literary cabaret, was free to express his discontent in moderation. When the safety valve entitled to perform would not relieve, but would create action, the authorities intervened. To sum up, in a stage anti-Antisemitism in which the uncircumcised dog is an anti-Semite, a heavenly Canaan wedding is impossible, the anti-Semitic head is a tuches, and the last Jew put the order of Polonia Restituta on his tuches, the mass culture enabled the artist and audience to take symbolic revenge on the oppressing power. As Diego Rodman has underscored, this performance played a crucial role in shaping an oppositional discourse amid oppression. Through media such as theater, jokes, songs, and skits, the mechanism of mass culture enabled the expression of symbolic revenge. Whether through repetition or reinterpretation by different audiences and media, this symbolic expression helped counter feeling the helplessness and reinforce the Jewish self-image that was under constant attack. However, in the fractured social reality of interwar Poland, it only convinced the convinced. In this regard, within the framework of cultural commodification, translating these acts of retaliation into tangible political action has largely remained theoretical. In this commodified framework, the potential for a concrete step to spark change remained in the realm of impossible. Not less important, however, while providing temporary relief from societal distress through comedic catharsis, the commodification of culture functioned as a sedative pill, dampening sociopolitical tensions that could otherwise lead to significant social upheaval and change. The inherent limitations of commodified culture rendered this resistance, as represented by Tutush, the dog, impotent. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you very much for your insightful and enlightening talk. And perhaps, Miriam, could you look at the audience, and I will have a look at the chat.
Okay. Are there any questions here in the hall? Comments? Or chat? Do you see anything?
No.
No? Okay, I have a question, comment, but you sort of summed up, so it's in a way already answered. All this was mainly for Jewish audience, right?
Not only for Jews, but
So cabarets were also visited by non-Jews with such anti-Semitic program? And there were any responses or in the press?
It depends on the press, but mostly the people that went to this kind of cabaret were those convinced of that the anti-Semitism
Wrong.
it is inappropriate, senseless.
Okay, thank you. That was my question. Any other comments? Okay, thank you very much. It was very enlightening. And you want to say the program further, how it goes? We have now a break. I don't have the printed program. Is it half an hour we have now?
Yes, originally we said there should be a coffee break from 3:30 to 4. So maybe,
We're a little bit behind.
yeah.
So maybe we will cut it to 15 minutes. Is that okay?
Mhm.
So in 15 minutes, we'll come back and hear Richie Kahn's lecture. Okay, thank you.
Okay. אני יודע, כן, כן. אני מדבר איתו כל הזמן. כן.
אנחנו רק רנקויות.
אז זה טוב, אתה 200 שם. אני לא נגעתי בסדרה. אוקיי. No вообще да. Ну, потому что туда он тоже отходит много всех.
לא, אני ניסיתי לשאול משהו ואז לא ראו, אני לא אומר, לא רואים אותי? שלום, קיבלת את המעבר? כן, כן, תודה.
Good afternoon. Let's start our final session. So I'm truly honored to introduce Professor Richard Cohen, who is Professor Emeritus in Modern Jewish History in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He served as an academic director of the Israeli Center of Research Excellence, ICOR, for the study of cultures of place in the modern Jewish world, and was formerly the Paulette and Claude Kelman Chair in French Jewry Studies at the Hebrew University. His research interests have focused on the history of Jews in Western and Central Europe and on the interrelationship between art and society in the modern period. Among his publications are The Burden of Conscience, French Jewish Leadership During the Holocaust, Jewish Icons, Art and Society in Modern Europe, and with Miriam Raniel, Samuel Hirschenberg, a Polish Jewish artist in Turmal. among many other books co-curated and co-edited. Cohen has from court dues to the Rothschilds, art patronage and power. It's also a catalog of the exhibition in the Jewish Museum of New York, and La Juive Iran and Thomas de Thème, Musée d'Art et d'Histoire du Judaisme in Paris. His new book, Visual Imaginations of Modern Jewish History, will be published in January 2027. So today's talk is on Jewish icons of modernity, creating a Jewish pantheon.
Good afternoon. I've had many good experiences working with Miriam for many years, and I hope we will continue doing so in the future. From the end of the 18th century, artists of Jewish origin showed minimal preoccupation with Jewish subject matter, engaged in both individual odysseys and a quest for public acknowledgement. These artists turned at times to contemporary Jewish figures, at times to historical ones, to promote personal or public agendas. In exploiting the symbolic significance of these figures, the artists vented internal anxieties and aspirations while generally favoring the process of acculturation. Biblical themes and figures seldom engaged their imagination, while certain personalities did arouse them. I will concentrate in this lecture on two such figures, Baruch Spinoza and Moses Mendelssohn. Spinoza, as you all know, emerged in the artistic imagination as a cultural vision heralding opposition to rabbinical authority. His image was appropriated as an exemplar of non-traditional forms of expression and as a representation of alternative directions in Jewish life. Notably, as early as the 17th century, long before artists of Jewish origin began to focus on him, non-Jewish artists were attracted to Spinoza. In light of the significant scholarship stimulated by his philosophy, biblical criticism, and ostracism, it is easy to see why this image, his image, served as fodder for countless depictions. For artists of Jewish origin from the 19th century on, his image was associated with more classical depictions, and his confrontation with Jewish law and sources became a dominant theme. He and Uriel da Costa, who were both excommunicated, afforded artists an opportunity to interpret the past imaginatively and present their own perspective, as their legacy became involved in the historical reconstruction of a Jewish pedigree. Mark Antokolsky, the Russian Jewish sculptor, vacillated between identifying with Russian realism and engaging with Jewish themes, though the influence of the former was clearly predominant and penetrated his few Jewish works. In his embarking on the Friends of Mankind project, which included the figures of Christ, Moses, Socrates, and Spinoza, he thought that he had a steadfast vision for humankind. In his sculpture, we see a pensive Spinoza sitting in an armchair, head tilted, hands folded. Pages of a manuscript are on his lap, and an open book lies as though having fallen on the ground. He expresses here the long struggles Spinoza endured while remaining thoughtful and in quiet contemplation. As no authentic portrait of Spinoza exists, he worked from some of the more common ones, available images which showed him clean-shaven with long curly hair. Here Antokolsky gave expression to his inner Jewish feelings. For the artist, Spinoza belonged to the ranks of Jesus and Socrates, all representatives of individuals in conflict with history. The American sculptor of Sephardic Dutch origin, Moses Ezekiel, visited Antokolsky's studio in Paris in the early 1880s, and was so impressed by the work that he created his own sculpture of Spinoza. Known by then for his imposing statue on religious liberty, which you see here from 1876, celebrating America's centennial, he created a bronze statuette of Spinoza, seen standing in contemplation, his left hand placed behind his vest, inside his vest. Several years later, probably after 1900, he returned to the subject, showing the direct impact of Antokolsky's work. Antokolsky's Spinoza was exhibited in 1896 at the Berlin Industrial Exposition, and it was lauded by the Hebrew and Yiddish writer Reuben Brainin. Antokolsky's Spinoza opined Brainin could only have emerged from a deep identification with the philosopher. The critic was no less pleased with the non-Jewish appreciation of what he perceived as the Amsterdam soulmates. Quote, enlightened Europeans are bowing and kneeling before these two Hebrews in endless respect. Brainin further noted that Spinoza's facial appearance was one of humility, graciousness of spirit, integrity, and simplicity that is the essence of beauty. Wisdom brightens up his face with a special light. Brainin and later Martin Buber drafted Antokolsky and Spinoza into the realm of Jewish nationalism and highlighted their unique cultural contribution. Antokolsky had a different agenda vis-a-vis Spinoza. He saw him more akin to his own acculturationist hybrid existence. In Spinoza Before the Rabbis, the Hungarian artist of Jewish origin, Izo Kövés, pursued his engagement with Jewish historical events that emphasized the interaction of Jews with non-Jews and gave prominence to enlightened Jews. Created at the beginning of the 20th century, the painting shows Spinoza in the center of the canvas, composed and collected as three seated, bearded figures eye him with disdain. The artist's sympathy is clearly with Spinoza, whose image as a pure young man is in sharp contrast to the figures of the rabbis, whose image as a pure to the figures of the rabbis. Rays of light from outside shine on Spinoza, an element Kövés probably borrowed from his Parisian teacher, Jean-Paul Laurence, who used it in his depiction of Franciscan friar Bernard de Lisieux, arguing his case before a tribunal of the Inquisition, challenging its draconian measures against heretical behavior at the end of the 13th and beginning of the 14th centuries in Languedoc. It was during these years that Kövés was in Paris, and he studied under Laurence. As such, he both breathed the air of anti-clerical France and eventually drew a parallel between their historical hero and his, not to mention Max Liebermann's Jesus. And of course, I have to say something about Hirschenberg in the context of being here because of Miriam. Hirschenberg, the Polish Jewish artist who starkly portrayed the Jewish dilemma at the turn of the 19th century, contrasted sharply between the free-thinking Spinoza and the world of Orthodox Jews at the beginning of the 20th century. The themes of tradition and modernity preoccupied him throughout his career. In one of the last works which he did before leaving for Jerusalem in 1907, he created this vast canvas, possibly giving expression to the clash he anticipated in his future residence. Little did Hirschenberg know how relevant this painting would be in 2026 in this country, where you see Spinoza here walking down the street, absorbed in a book, oblivious to the commotion he is causing. In the background, 9 elderly Orthodox Jews, unattractively portrayed, huddled together and gesticulate their appreciation and derision of him, distancing themselves from him as if fearing contamination. One of them bends down to pick up a stone, apparently intending to heave it at the heretic. A 10th younger Orthodox Jew, maybe the most interesting one in this painting, is differently dressed and separated compositionally from the others. He stares intently at the ambulant Spinoza, and he appears to be making a defensive motion. One imagines that Spinoza has cast a provocateur spell on him. He is in some ways betwixt and between. Should he join and cast his lot and become the 10th man and symbolically join the minyan, or should he follow the skeptic? Spinoza seems to have no fear, and his central presence in the painting points to Hirschenberg's identification with the humanist values to which the former subscribed and his rejection of orthodoxy. The painting continued Hirschenberg's long-term engagement with Spinoza. 20 years before, he created Da Costa and Spinoza in 1888, which creates a direct connection between the two excommunicated figures and shows Da Costa with his arm around the young Spinoza, who holds a bow of flowers as Da Costa teaches him the secrets of nature. Fast forward, more than 8 decades later, in 1982, Spinoza appeared in Larry Rivers' Part 2 History of Matzah. Rivers was commissioned to create a history of the Jews. With Matzah serving as the background, he embarked on a triptych, which has been described as a mixture of classicism and vulgarity, tradition and iconoclasm, beauty and folly. Part 2 of the history is devoted to European Jewry. The images are interwoven over sections of a map of Europe, ranging from the classical period to the 20th century. Near the center is a rabbinic figure, hovering above a wooden synagogue from Wólpa in Poland, and above a diluted portrayal of Gottlieb's Jews praying in the synagogue on the Day of Atonement. Spinoza appears behind the figure, as you see, but he's clearly visible, looking very much at peace. Placing him in this position, coming from behind, as it were, grants him and his opposition to the rabbinical ordinances a significant symbolic meaning in the history of the Jews. In addition, it suits the artist's unorthodox treatment of a number of the figures and diverse forces that he brought together in this part of his history. Moses Mendelssohn does not appear in Rivers' Matzah, yet for 2 centuries, Mendelssohn's image has served as the icon of the Haskalah and Jewish acculturation in the modern period, and as the harbinger of the modern period in Jewish history. And though many of you know some of the works that I will be showing, the few works I'll be showing, I have to at least relate to them. Oppenheim's famous painting of 1856, Lafayette and Lessing visiting Moses Mendelssohn, spurred renewed interest in Mendelssohn's figure. Oppenheim chose the debate between Mendelssohn and Lafayette, continuing his interest in and commentary on the German-Jewish dialogue. His sketchbook contains drawings he made in 1842 of an encounter between Mendelssohn and Lafayette with and without Lessing, where Mendelssohn is seated close to Lafayette and intently listening to his companion. But it's not clear why Oppenheim set the subject aside and returned to it only 13 years later in 1855, when he produced the sketch, and he brings, of course, Lessing and a woman in the doorway. Perhaps he wished to lend support to the claim that the Jews could preserve their distinctiveness even after the failure of the 1848 revolution. The work raises several relevant questions. Why did the artist choose to revive an incident that had been so painful for Mendelssohn? What was the purpose of the revision of historical fact embodied in the scene, combining 2 events that took place 5 years apart? How did Oppenheim wish to present Mendelssohn? Lafayette met Mendelssohn occasionally in 1763, 1764 for conversations on literary matters. Lessing was not present at any of these encounters, during which the discussion centered on Mendelssohn's positive and tolerant attitude toward Christianity and Jesus. Due to Mendelssohn's image in the Berlin public, Lafayette resolved 5 years later to send the philosopher a copy of his German translation of a book by Charles Bonnet, a Genevan naturalist and philosopher, laying out proofs of Christian doctrine. Lafayette inscribed the book, and with a lengthy dedication to Mendelssohn, called upon him to refute Bonnet's proofs publicly or in the event that he could not accept Christianity, as behooved a man who aspired in the spirit of Socrates to truth and integrity. Oppenheim was very much aware that Bonnet's book had been a significant element in their polemic. At the center of Oppenheim's painting, Lafayette and Mendelssohn are in discussion after Lafayette entered Mendelssohn's home. To eliminate all doubt, Oppenheim inscribed the name Bonnet at the top of one of the book's open pages, and Lafayette is aggressive in a sense. Mendelssohn sits erect, gazing cogently at Lafayette and listening attentively. Between them stands Lessing in front of the library. He casts a critical gaze at Lafayette, so I would think. By adding Lessing to the scene, Oppenheim highlighted the connection between the playwright and the philosopher, further underlined, of course, by the chessboard on the table, representing the rational game that the two men often played together. Indeed, it appears that the game has been interrupted by the uninvited arrival of Lafayette. Mendelssohn's figure is consistent with Oppenheim's own aspiration to maintain his Jewish identity while remaining German. Oppenheim uses the controversy, Mendelssohn's relationship with Lessing, and bourgeois lifestyle to celebrate a form of Jewish integration and particularism that many, of course, 19th century German Jews appreciated. His painting elicited a number of responses. As some of you probably know, the first came from Louis Katzenstein, an artist of Jewish origin from Kassel. In his At Chest, he offers a revision of the Mendelssohn-Lafayette dialogue in Oppenheim's painting by reversing the positions of the disputants. Here, Mendelssohn is speaking, calmly explaining his position to Lafayette, who listens attentively as Lessing looks on fondly, seemingly pleased with his friend's arguments. Katzenstein organized Mendelssohn's living room in a different way. The library appears behind Mendelssohn's back, and behind Lessing stands what is apparently a piano bearing a clock and what seems to be a book of music, indicating the cultural ambiance of this home. Katzenstein may have been alluding here to the relationship between the philosopher and his grandson, Felix Mendelssohn, the composer, thereby creating a chain in the cultural evolution of the family. And in 1864, 3 years after Katzenstein completed this work, Oppenheim portrayed Felix playing piano in front of Goethe. The chess game, which Katzenstein shows as the title for his painting, remains on the table together with various books and a decanter. And Mendelssohn here is portrayed as a person with ties to Jewish tradition who lives in an enlightened cultural world and is esteemed by both Lafayette and Lessing. The historical polemic between Mendelssohn and Lafayette and Oppenheim's painting appeared in other late representations, with interesting deviations attesting to the staying power of this central controversy in Mendelssohn's life. One, published by Adolf Kohut in his encyclopedic book at the end of the 19th century, bearing the caption, Lessing and Lafayette visit Mendelssohn after Louis Katzenstein's oil painting, differs from the others in a number of ways. Here the same three figures sit around a table. The clergyman focuses intently on a thoughtful Mendelssohn. Lessing, sitting between them, looks with interest at Mendelssohn, waiting to hear how the philosopher will reply. On the bookcase behind the three figures stands a bust of Socrates, recalling the well-known association of Mendelssohn with his Greek predecessor. Izo Kirvish, the artist that we met above, linked Mendelssohn to Socrates in an original way. Here he depicts Mendelssohn visiting the royal palace at Potsdam in 1771, probably in 1892, where Mendelssohn is seen bowing before Frederick the Great, while Baron von Fritsch, the Saxon cabinet minister, stands behind him. Both seem to be pleased receiving this guest. Yet we know that as a historical record, that Frederick did not receive Mendelssohn when he arrived. Only Fritsch did, a fact that the artist may or may not have known. Once again, light illuminates Mendelssohn and Frederick, an element that Kivich used to mark Mendelssohn as an Enlightenment figure. High above, in a corner of the room, in a direct line with Mendelssohn's face, Kivich placed a bust of Socrates, completing the identification between Mendelssohn and the Enlightenment. Presumably, the artist sought to enhance Jewish esteem by expressing the respect that the powerful Prussian leader granted its most representative Jewish subject, an omen for rulers and Jews in other countries. Thus, historical portrayals of Mendelssohn depicted three important facets of his life: the Lafayette affair, his visit to the royal palace in 1771, and his friendship with Lessing. Artistic intentions varied. However, all were drawn by the figure of Mendelssohn, who represented the breaking down of long-standing cultural barriers. For a century, this historical and visual interpretation evoked Mendelssohn's figure at important junctures in his life that resonated with moments in the lives of the artists. A century later, visitors to the Jewish Museum in Berlin could, during their visit, come across a machine, insert a small sum of money into it, and receive a reproduction of Abraham's 18th century medal engraved with Mendelssohn's image. Installing the machine, the curators offered material expression of the first and foremost cultural icon of German Jewry since the 18th century, and enabled the visitors to imagine the time prior to the hardships and suffering the German Jews underwent under National Socialism. So the visual icon of Mendelssohn maintained its potency for more than 200 years due to the enduring interest in him as a Jewish philosopher embedded in the culture of his time. The demand for images of Mendelssohn began in his lifetime, which I haven't shown you, and following his death came the time for memorialization and commemoration, followed by artists depicting central incidents in his life that were important to them. Later, he became an emblem of German Jewry at its height, one of the eminent men of his people, similar to the way Spinoza emerged as a unique figure who represented for artists and cultural figures the spirit of free, rational thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your fascinating talk. Any comments, questions here, there? Julian, please.
I have a question. There is a portrait that appears in Mendelssohn's house, right? And
Mendelssohn's
Gray.
house?
Yes.
Ah,
Is this the Frederick the Great here and here? Yeah,
supposed to be a Russian leader, yes.
Frederick the Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was very interesting. Can you please explain the butterfly on the head of the skull? Top of the skull in the coin.
In the court?
The coin.
Ah,
The rest.
The medal.
There's a butterfly. Thank you.
I think this is related to Phaidon. In terms of,
soul.
yeah.
That is the soul.
this is when Abraham, they did it in 1774 after Mendelssohn published Pfeiffer. Yeah. I think any of you who have been to the Berlin Jewish Museum today, it's no longer there. The machine is no longer there. And I think it's disappointing because in a sense, it really gave an expression of what people felt, that if you're leaving the Berlin Jewish Museum, you should at least have something in your hand which will speak to you of the great period or the great figure of Berlin Jewry. But they've removed it. Well, you know, as some of the people in this audience are curators of museums, they know that at some point they want to change things, and this is what they changed. I have the medal that I took when I was there.
I will try now just to remove the presentation to see, maybe we have there some comments online, not here.
Oh boy, you're very impressive. I don't know how to work this.
No.
No,
Okay.
sorry.
Sorry.
I wish you well. Before
Spinoza's left hand.
Spinoza's left hand?
Yeah, always on the.
No, sometimes I've seen it. I have various images of Spinoza. Sometimes it isn't there. Sometimes, very often he's sitting. Very often he's sitting, but there are a whole series of Spinoza works from the end of the 19th century until you come to this image by Larry Rivers, which I think is one of the most remarkable ways to show Spinoza, because he only brings, you see, part of his face, but he's behind the rabbi. And that part of it, I think, is in some ways symbolic, that he wants to say, Spinoza is there, he's very pleased, he's very happy to be there, but he comes behind the rabbi. But because he objects to the rabbi. So I'd have to check exactly how many times, where his hands are.
In your images, there are 4.
Yeah, but there are many more images which I.
I'm very interested in the question, which Jew became first an icon in his lifetime?
Excuse me?
Which image of the Jew lived in his lifetime became an icon
In his life.
in his lifetime, in that person's lifetime? I wonder if it's Mendelssohn, because I always have the impression it's Montefiore was the first. Do you think Mendelssohn in his lifetime, or it's after his life that he became an icon?
Oppenheim doesn't do Montefiore. Or
No, I'm asking about the person now. Which Jew first became in his lifetime an icon?
I think
Mendelssohn before Montefiore. I mean, I'm asking,
Yes.
the images of Mendelssohn
No.
are mostly after his
No,
lifetime, or?
already from 1774 until Mendelssohn dies in 1786, there are images of Mendelssohn, and he himself sends people images of him. He's very aware that people want to see him,
Jews and
Jews
non-Jews?
and non-Jews. And so there's also a ring which 7 people who are close to Mendelssohn create this right after he died, that they each have a medal, a ring of Mendelssohn, which they can all wear. So in some ways, I think that Mendelssohn came before Montefiore in that sense, and I don't know if there's anybody.
I thought of Shabtai Tzvi also, but.
No,
Not-
Shabtai Tzvi, but Shabtai Tzvi is very different.
Yeah.
I know that there's a great deal about Shabtai Tzvi now in different places.
Yes.
But I would think that if you go back to the end of the 18th century until Montefiore, I don't know if there's anybody else
Yeah.
who has that kind of power. Maybe rabbinical.
No, but not that many images. I'm saying.
No, I'm
Even
saying, even visual images of some rabbi. We'll have to check that.
Einstein is later.
What?
Earlier.
Who are you thinking?
No, I said Einstein. But Spinoza is not such an important icon in Jewish tradition.
He becomes in the 19th century. In the 19th century, he becomes important. For artists, he becomes important. Now, in 1925-26, I don't remember exactly the year, at the Heath University, Klausner gets up and says, the excommunication is over. You are our brother. Now, it takes a long time before there is any image of Spinoza by Israeli art.
There's no Spinoza Street in Jerusalem.
And of course, there's no street. Go ahead.
In Rehovot we have Spinoza Street. In Rehovot, there is.
No, Mendelssohn, there's no Mendelssohn in Jerusalem. No, Heine there is.
But it's very new. After big debate.
But there, now, just one second, I would tell you that in 2002, there was a stamp in memory of Spinoza. And that was a controversy because the people in the government, the religious elements in the government did not want to have a stamp in memory of Spinoza. But the person who was then the head of the Philatelist Society, Balin, not Yossi Balin, but his brother, he decided that I'm going to push for it, and there's a very lovely stamp in memory of Spinoza in 2000.
Richie, is Mendelssohn represented in Israel? Mendelssohn, in Israel.
You're asking me if Mendelssohn was?
Represented in Israel.
It's a question.
Good question.
Yeah, I think somebody has to go look for him.
Yeah.
I have a question about the Oppenheim. Did you find proof that they ever met Mendelssohn and Lavater? Because I never did.
Who?
I had the impression, after trying to find when a meeting could have taken place, that they only communicated by writing against each other. Did they actually meet?
Yes, there was a meeting, but we don't know whether Lessing was actually there. We do know that Lavater came to Mendelssohn's house. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so yes, wonderful. So yeah, please, we are hearing you.
Thank you so much for a fascinating lecture. Actually, thank you everybody for an absolutely fascinating day. Richard, may I ask you a question about Fromet Guggenheim, also known as Mrs. Mendelssohn, because she appears in some of the paintings of the, the Mendelssohn, Lavater, Lessing subject matter, but I think she doesn't appear in all of them, and she appears in different ways. And I was wondering whether you would like to say anything about the gender politics of the picture in relation to not actually, this is not a question about Fromet Guggenheim. This is a question about mid to late 19th century German Jewish social structures and how they saw this.
Now, question has two parts to it. Question at the beginning relates to Oppenheim's depiction of Madame Oppenheim, and the other part of the question relates to whether women were part of German Jewish visual material. Is that what you're asking?
No, not really. Can you still hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. No, I think I am interested in what it said about what the different versions of the paintings say about gender in German Jewish society among the audience. It's this is a question about the then audience, the reception, not the reception, the people for whom these paintings were painted.
Oppenheim was clearly aware and brought women into settings where he's dealing with Jewish situations. Already in 1833, when he brings the painting of the son who comes back from the army, and later again when he has two non-Jewish women looking from the window into seeing the Jews who are praying. I think he's aware. Whether it's central to him, I don't think so. But he's certainly aware of it, and he presents her coming into the setting, which really creates the bourgeois atmosphere that, notwithstanding the fact that Lafayette was seemingly not invited to be there while he is with Lessing, the woman, his wife, is coming in and bringing food, something to drink to all of them. So I think that he's aware of it, but I wouldn't say that she is central. The issue that is central to him is to present, of course, this conflict between the two of them. Yeah. And of course to have Lessing in the back.
But what does it mean for Katzenstein to eliminate her?
We have very little knowledge about Katzenstein's works. This is the only work that he does, which is known, that deals with a Jewish theme. So I couldn't answer you, but it would be interesting if one could find it. Thank you. I haven't met you in many years.
She comes in with the tea.
Yeah.
Because it's not just food. She's coming in with.
It's not tea. It's coffee.
It's coffee. Whatever. She comes in with that. There's a heated argument going on, and the woman comes in as a sort of peacemaking bit. Calm down, have a drink, don't get overexcited. So, I mean, she's actually highlighted in the picture as coming in, and she not only compositionally balances Lessing, but she's actually trying to, I always read it as her trying to calm things down and being some sort of, okay, don't attack him so much. And she's not needed in the picture where it's Mendelssohn who's attacking. He's defending himself. She's coming in to help or overlook. This one, you don't need her because he's defending himself.
Because he's the center.
And there, he's being attacked. So she's coming in with the stuff.
You say, interesting. In other words, you see her as being the pacifier in that sense.
Yeah.
Fair.
Do we know for sure that it's the wife?
Yeah.
And not, we don't. For sure, not the maid or somebody else. Okay, somebody knows.
That's a good point.
Well, thank you, Richard. This was a wonderful talk, and I would love for it to be an hour long and not just a 20-minute long talk. And hello, Eva. This is Shir Kochavi, who was your PhD student. It's lovely to see you. And this painting is actually at the Magnus Collection in California, which is a project that I had when I was working there. in Berkeley, California. And while we were and this was on loan when the Jewish Museum in Berlin was reopened, at the Jewish Museum in Berlin. And while it was on display at the Magnus, we actually tried to, and forgive me for jumping in, but we actually tried to identify as many Jewish elements and as many secular elements that appear in this imagery to kind of highlight the social structure at the time and highlight different elements that are, some are hidden and some are more put on view and highlighted in this painting. And we couldn't reach a decision whether this is his wife or not his wife in terms of the woman. We actually thought it's probably not his wife.
Probably not his
the
wife.
character. She's bringing in coffee, but we also thought that it's interesting that she's highlighted because of the light behind her, because she's coming into the room, of course, from outside, and she's external to the situation. So I completely agree with Ziva in her comment on her coming into the room and asking what her position is going to be while she enters the room. But while we researched it, we really identified her or thought of her more of a character that comes to show the social structure and the social atmosphere at the time in the house of Moses Mendelssohn. And also, of course, showing that it was a wealthy household, etc., to kind of highlight.
Were you interested in the chess game? See,
Yes.
at some point, I had read, someone thought that that the white or the red, I don't remember, is winning. And then I discussed this with Dmitry Shulensky, who was a very fine chess player, and he said, no, you can't see that there is a definite attempt to present one or the other winning in this chess game. But as you can see over time, the chess game became very important in terms of the way where it is placed and what they're doing with it. It's an interesting issue. Here the chess game is really less important before it's still on the table. And you wonder, of course, how an image becomes very important in terms of trying to create the relationship between Lessing and Mendelssohn. And here Mendelssohn, of course, is clean shaven, but she isn't in the other. Anyways, you've all seen these paintings many times.
The Oppenheim first moment, the woman.
To the woman.
Yeah, she looks very much. There's an Oppenheim painting of the Sukkah, right? It's Oppenheim, right? In which there is clearly a maid coming in. The wife is sitting at the table, and the posture and the mode of presentation of this woman is very much like that maid.
She's serving food.
I only know from the postcard.
She's serving food.
She what?
She's in the sukkah image. She's also bringing something.
Yes, but she's in the sukkah, she's making soup.
Yeah.
She's young and very attractive.
But there's also a woman in the synagogue in the ceremony of the circumcision.
Yes, in the door.
She's in the door. Exactly like this.
Yes. That's closer. Then Sukkah. Sukkah is an attractive young woman. How do you see that this woman is old? She is dressed. The other one has a much more. Sukkah, she has much more open dress. This one is much more common.
Well, I think maybe this is the right moment to thank Miriam for this very fine day.
Okay, so we came to the end. Let me just close this so we can see our participants on Zoom. By the way, Eva, I saw your question. They did draw each other. I didn't understand this when you asked, or if you're still there. Anyway, so
Yes.
yeah, they drew each other. It's not self-portraits, but they drew each other. And Gottlieb looks more Jewish, but someone else drew him. Okay.
The nose.
The nose. Okay, so thank you very, very much. I think it was a thrilling day, and thank you to all the lecturers, and thank you for bringing new material, new research. It was very stimulating, and I hope that our colleagues and friends on Zoom were able to participate in here as well. I'm sorry for all the technical problems, but this enabled us to have a larger international audience, and not so normal and usual in our days, but we managed. So thank you very much, everybody. Good night. Olaf, do you want to say just thank you or goodbye or whatever, because I'm turning now off.
Well, thank you, and I hope
Okay.
for future cooperations and that they will take place on site.
Yeah.